Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to Election Night coverage live on TV2. I'm your host, Brittany Lee.
And I am your co-host, Laura Roberts. Over the next 2 hours, we will give you the latest poll results on all local and national issues.
TV2 sat down with professors on campus to find out what we can be expecting over the next 4 years, depending on who wins the election.
And AU President Dr. Finks will be making a live guest appearance this evening. It's all coming next on TV2.
Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us. Breaking news this top of the hour: in the race for the presidency, Barack Obama is inching farther and farther ahead. With the close of some polls just minutes ago, MSNBC is calling that the Democratic Party has claimed a total of 175 electoral votes. Republican John McCain is trailing behind in the race with a total of 58 votes. That has just been updated to 70 votes. Key battleground states that the Obama party has won include Pennsylvania's 21 votes, and as well as all votes from Delaware. Important states that have not yet been announced include Ohio and Florida. The candidate that will be named the next president of the United States needs a total of 270 electoral votes in order to keep the win over the race.
For the race for Attorney General, Mike Kreitz is ahead 51% over Richard Corriday, who is behind 43%.
And in the race for representatives to Congress, Rob Latta is ahead by 58%, and George Mays is trailing behind at 42%.
In the race for the Representative Congress for the 16th District, John Bocherry is ahead 50% to 49%.
For state senator, we have Bob Gibbs trailing behind James Riley with 62% to 37%.
Also for state rep, Margaret Ann Rule is ahead 55% over Dwayne Grassbaugh, who is behind 44%.
In state rep, we have Dave Hall leading at 59% over Luke Brewer at 40%.
For Ashland County Commissioner, Barb Queer leads the polls with a 66% margin over Dwayne Stiltsline.
And over County Commissioner as well, we have Michael Welch running unopposed, and he has won the title with 100% of the votes.
For Clerk of Courts, Annette Shaw, running unopposed, has 100% of the votes.
For the sheriff, we have Wayne Reisner also running unopposed with 100% of the votes.
Recorder Barbara J. Harding, also running unopposed, has 100% of the votes.
For treasurer, Cindy Funk is also running unopposed with 100% of the votes.
Engineer Edward J. Mexner, also running unopposed, has 100% of the votes.
And for the coroner, we have William M. Emery, who is also running unopposed, receiving 100% of the votes.
In the State Board of Education, 5th District, Robin Hovis has 58% of the votes, while Richard Jarovrek has 42%.
And in the 9th District State Board of Education, we have Joseph Russo leading with 70% over Maureen O'Connor with 30%.
Also, Ohio Supreme Court, we have Peter Sikora leading Evelyn Stratton with 69% of the votes.
And again, for the judge of Fifth Appeals Court, we have William Hoffman leading 64% over Leanne Sefovic.
The Ashland probate judge, Damian Versio, is running unopposed with 100% of the votes.
And next in State Issue 1, we have 68% voting yes and no is 32%.
In Issue 2, Ohio Continue to Clean Ohio Environmental Program, 60% of voters voted yes and 34% voted no.
State Issue 3 has closed with a total of 75% saying yes and a total of no is 25%.
State Issue 5, Change Payday Lending Fees, Rates and Practices, 69% voted yes, 31% voted no.
In State Issue 6, there was a close of 70% stating no and 30% stating yes.
Ashland City Local Liquor Option, yes 59%, no 41%.
For the Loudonville Village Fire Department, we have a close of 81% stating yes and a no of 19%.
For the Loudonville Village Fire Department, we have 71% voted yes, 29% voted no.
For the Green Perrysville Joint Fire District, we have a close of 56% at yes and 44% at no.
Green Township Cemetery, 71% voted yes, 29% voted no.
In the Hanover Township Local Liquor Option, 48% stated yes and 52% stated no.
The Mifflin Township Fire and Roads voted 79% yes and no 21%.
In Mifflin Township Local Liquor Option, 51% was yes and 49% said no.
Orange Township Fire and EMS, we have no update yet on them so far.
And in Troy Township Fire Department, we have a close of 51% stating yes and 47% stating no.
Hillsdale Local School District, we have a 30% voting yes and 70% voting no.
In Mapleton Local School District, we have 32% at yes and 68% at no.
Ashland County Health District, 62% of voters have voted yes, 38% voted no. The Ashland County Board of MRDD had 2 renewal levies on the ballot today, totaling $3.6 million. A renewal of the money would help maintain current programs and services, diversify adult programs, and improve on current technology for Dale Roy School, adult and prenatal services. Currently, the Ashland County Board of MRDD serves more than 300 families in the area. If the renewal does not pass, the board will have to make adjustments to the programs and services it currently offers. The passage of this renewal would not increase taxpayers are currently paying. A taxpayer owning a home worth $100,000 will continue to pay just over $9.
Hillsdale Local School District asked voters to approve a $19 million bond issue today at the polls. If the issue is approved, the money will be used to build a new school to house kindergarten through 12th grade students. Although the cost of the new school is estimated around $33 million, the state is willing to contribute approximately $14 million towards the new building. The Ohio Schools Facility Commission found the shortcomings of the district include handicapped accessibility problems, outdated plumbing and heating, lack of insulation, among other problems. OSFC determined to re-renovate the problems. The cost would be about $22 million, which is $3 million more than building a new facility. The state will not contribute towards renovation costs. If the issue passes, the elementary and middle schools will be demolished and part of the high school will be removed. A taxpayer owning a home valued at $100,000 can expect to pay roughly $270 more a year if the issue is passed.
Voters in Green Perrysville Joint Fire District voted on a $1.3 million levy this afternoon. Funds generated from this levy will allow the department to have 2 EMTs at the station during weekdays. State law currently requires 2 EMTs to be present during the transport of a patient by squad. Since Green Perrysville is a part-time volunteer department, it often does not have 2 EMTs available during the week, when most volunteers are at work. In emergency situations, it may be required to wait for EMTs to assist from Loudonville, Jeromesville, Mifflin, or Hayesville, which could jeopardize the safety of patients. The new levy would cost taxpayers owning a home valued at $100,000, roughly $46 a year.
Later tonight, when the votes have been tallied, Ohio residents will know whether or not casinos will become a new place of venue within the state. If Issue 6 is passed tonight by Ohio voters, $600 million will be given to the Resort Casino in Clinton County, Ohio. If approved, this casino could open up nearly 5,000 jobs to Ohio residents, with an average of $34,000 a year with benefits. According to the proposed issue, tax revenues will be divided between all 88 counties in the state based upon their population. Up next, to get the latest poll results and find out how the election process began in the U.S. Also, get an in-depth look at each of the presidential candidates past. Learn more when we return. It's all coming up next right here on TV2.
Hi, Mr. President. My parents believe that eating meals together will make our country strong. Is this something that you did when you were a kid?
I did eat with my family so long as my mother wasn't cooking.
Not good making fun of your mother, even if you are president. But it is good to have dinner with your kids. We know the more often children have dinner with their families, the less likely they are to smoke, drink, and use drugs. So simply having dinner together can help your children forever, even if you're not a great cook.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, we believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world, dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
My name's Andy McDonald. I ride this useless wooden toy for a living. It's hard. I've been doing it for 13 years. I'm still lame. I do a trick called a 540. Took me a good 6 years to learn. There's a whole generation of skateboarders out there that are just as talented athletically as any basketball or football player. It takes somebody that's not going to be afraid to fall down a lot, because you definitely will fall down. You're not a failure until you refuse to get back up. Drugs are only going to hinder what I'm trying to do. That right there is my idea of getting high.
When will the next natural disaster hit? A public health crisis strike? Another terrorist threat emerge? How long will it take for help to arrive? Ohio Citizen Corps is committed to making every minute count by having volunteers ready. Physicians, nurses, teachers, retirees, everyone can help. You can make a difference. Join Ohio Citizen Corps. Call or go to serveohio.org. The time to prepare for trouble is before it hits.
Hi, Mr. President. My parents believe that eating meals together will make our country strong. Is this something that you did when you were a kid?
I did eat with my family so long as my mother wasn't cooking.
Not good making fun of your mother, even if you are president. But it is good to have dinner with your kids. We know the more often children have dinner with their families, the less likely they are to smoke, drink, and use drugs. So simply having dinner together can help your children forever, even if you're not a great cook.
Hi, I'm Molly, here with Ashland University's president, Dr. Finks. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Nice to be here, Molly.
We were wondering how you think the student body is going to respond if McCain were to become president.
Well, I don't know that there's going to be any major response on whoever wins, whether it's McCain or Obama. I'm not sure how either one of them will actually affect or impact the campus itself, if that's what you meant.
Yes.
You know.
Do you think there's more excitement generated for either candidate on our campus?
I think the election has generated a lot of excitement for both candidates. Definitely. Actually, going back to the primary election, when you had Hillary against Obama, when you had McCain against Mitch Romney, and a number of those, I think there was a lot of excitement generating at that point. And then going through that to this general election, I've seen more students engaged, more students involved. Especially, I think I've seen more students on the campus involved with the Democratic side, for example. A lot of our students have been actively engaged in the Democratic Party here in town. They've been volunteering at the headquarters. They were in the parades. I've seen them all over town. So I think that has energized the young Democrats on our campus.
It seems like there has been a lot of involvement, like you've been saying, with students on both the Republican and the Democratic end, getting involved in the community. Is this something new, or have students always been this active in the elections?
I don't think they've been this active. I think this is something new, and definitely I think it's been brought about by the passion of younger voters. You can see it all across the country. Students have been energized for registering to vote and are voting, I think, in mass numbers, more so than they've ever been. And again, I think our students here engaged in the community is the largest I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's great to see young people out there helping so much.
Exactly.
Have you done any volunteer work for either side this year?
I have not.
You probably had a busy time at the university.
I'm busy enough, right?
Yeah. So do you have any predictions for how Ohio is going to go, or any other states?
If I did, I could probably have won some money out in Las Vegas. I think Ohio is going to be very, very tough, as I think Florida is going to be tough. I just, before I came over, saw that Pennsylvania went for Obama, which I think the Republicans had hoped that they would win that. It looks like from the map, the other areas, other states are going pretty much where they had anticipated. But some of the big ones will be what happens with Ohio and what happens with Florida, and I think they're both too close to call at this point.
Yeah. So do you think there's going to be an early kind of decisive?
I think so. It appears there's been a turn in the tide in our country. I think a reaction both against the war. I think there's been a reaction with the economy. Both candidates have talked about change. I think Obama talked about change first and got a movement going in that whole piece. So I think it's going to be an early night. I think the decision will come in. I was looking at the Senate results. The Democrats have picked up 3 seats over the Republicans. That's another indication of whether the tide's turning or not. So I think they're looking at a stronger show in the Senate. I think the House will see more Democrats. And at this point, it does look like Obama is going to take it, but I'm not a predictor. So,
do you think a lot of this had to do with the Democrats running a stronger campaign?
Well, I think Obama definitely ran a very strong campaign. He's a very articulate person. He's energizing. He has rallied people. He is, for example, you can look in the black community. That has been publicized a lot lately. It has energized the black community. I think you'll see the largest turnout of both. First of all, you're going to see the largest registered voters among the African American population. You're going to probably see the largest vote ever, and predominantly, I would say it's going to be towards the Democratic Party.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Finks.
You're welcome.
We're going to send it back to Brittany Lee at the desk.
Thanks, Molly. The United States is one of the only countries in the world that holds an election process in which the next leader is handpicked by the people. Earlier this week, I was able to sit down with the Assistant Professor of Political Science at Ashland University, Professor Christopher Burkett, to learn how the elections evolved in the United States over the past century. Here's a look at my interview that took place earlier this week. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brittany Lee, and on the set with me today is Professor Burkett, who is the Assistant Professor of Political Science here at AU, and he's joining us to just give us a little bit of background information on the elections here in the U.S. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
The first question is, could you just give us a brief history of how the presidential elections have started here in the U.S.?
Sure. Yeah, well, with the passage of the Constitution in 1788, we had to kind of start from scratch. So Washington was elected the first president in 1789, and we went from there. the way presidents are elected has changed quite a bit, actually. At the time when Washington was elected, and well into, say, the 1800s, close to the 1900s, actually, candidates for president didn't usually go out on the stump, so to speak, go out campaigning for themselves. And Washington certainly didn't do that either. These sorts of things were handled more or less on the local level, on the state level. People would say, here's our candidate. And the reason they would do that is because of the way that the Electoral College works. So from the very beginning, what we had in our Constitution was this electoral system in which each state would get so many electoral votes based on the number of representatives it had in the House and number of and 2 senators. So each state would get to cast a certain number of electoral votes. You add it up, you have to get the magic number. Today it happens to be 270 electoral votes, and whoever has 270 or more today will be president. So we've been doing it that way since the passage of the Constitution and the first election of Washington in 1789.
Okay.
So.
And what have been the most memorable elections that have taken place? Can you think of any?
Gosh, there have been so many. I mean, we tend to think of these as pivotal elections that have in some ways fundamentally reshaped politics in the United States. And so the first one that comes to mind would be the election of 1800. Washington was president twice in the 1790s, followed by his vice president, John Adams, after him, and then Adams was running against Jefferson in the election of 1800. Well, what you had in the 1790s was the formation of political parties, which nobody really foresaw when they were writing the Constitution. So what makes the election of 1800 the first really significant election is you have one president of one party, Jefferson in this case, representing the Democratic Republicans, or Jeffersonian Republicans as they were sometimes called, essentially taking over from John Adams, who was the Federalist. So what makes this a significant election is you have a kind of transfer of power in a way from one party to the next, and we did it in America without having to resort to guns and pitchforks and the other sorts of things that other nations have done when they've sort of changed ruling regimes in a way throughout history. So 1800 was certainly a significant election. 1860, significant because this ushered in, of course, the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, as part of the newly formed Republican Party. That was a pivotal election. 32 would be a pivotal election when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected, really in a way signaling the rise of the Democratic Party, a rebirth of the Democratic Party in a way. That lasted well into the 1960s. So I would say that's a pivotal election. And the last one would be 1980 with Ronald Reagan, which was the first time that a Republican had been elected since, well, you had Richard Nixon in there, Eisenhower in the 1950s, but this really marked a sort of turning point that allowed Republicans, from Reagan on, you've had Reagan 2 terms, the first George Bush and the second George Bush. They've really the Republicans have dominated party politics since Reagan came into office in the 1980s. So. Okay, in this year's election, do you think that this is going to go down in history as a very memorable one? I think it will be. Of course it will be. For a number of reasons. I mean, the issues themselves, the economic questions that have really come forward to the forefront of the election have really called into question the differences between the Republicans on the one side, who tend to favor smaller, less regulatory government on the one hand, and the Democrats, at least as the way Obama's been presenting things, who, for example, just today, I heard an Obama speech this morning where he said, we don't need smaller government, that's an old idea, what we need is better government. So really the significance of this election is you've had a sort of redefining of what the role of government is and ought to be for at least the next 4 years. So I think that will make it a memorable election. Okay. So. And have there been any cases in previous years where the underdog in the election, the person that didn't seem to be doing so well, have they come out on top and end up winning the election? Yeah, that's a great question. The first one that pops to mind is 1948 with Harry Truman, who had been president, became president when FDR passed away, and Truman became president. He was running against Thomas Dewey Republican in 1948. And all the polls had Dewey ahead by a landslide going into this. In fact, he was so far ahead in the polls that a week before the election, they stopped polling. I mean, it was just taken for granted that he was going to win. The newspapers started printing, Dewey's going to win, and of course you've got the famous headline. I think it was it the New York Times, I believe, the night before printed the headline for Election Day, which says, Dewey wins by a landslide. And Truman won. So he certainly came from behind. It showed that he was behind. The polls showed that he was behind for a while. Came back. That election, by the way, forced pollsters to reevaluate how they go about collecting data, which is another interesting thing about this election, is that the way pollsters collect data has also changed for a number of reasons, partly because they, up for the last 20 years, they've done it by phone. They call up households. Well, now everybody has a cell phone. It's very hard to get reliable data when very few people use landlines anymore. The reason I say this is because there's a question out there, and I think a very good question, about whether the polls themselves that we've been seeing over the last 2 weeks to 6 weeks are very reliable. I personally think that they're a little closer than the polls themselves suggest. So I think another thing that will come out of this election is how do we go about collecting data for polling purposes. So,
well, good. Hopefully they'll be able to keep improving that method.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. They're going to have to do something because I personally I think the race is a little tighter than the polls have been suggesting. So
it'll turn out to be interesting for sure.
It's going to be a close one. It's going to be a close one.
And lastly today, I know that one of the biggest things in the Republican campaign has been Governor Sarah Palin. I know that was she the first female on the race for VP? Has there been any females in previous years to be on the ballot?
Yeah, she's the first on a Republican ballot. Geraldine Ferraro was the first woman on the ticket either for president or vice president. She was a vice presidential nominee for when Walter Mondale was running for president. So she was the first. But Palin was the first for Republican, which is really, again, in itself quite significant. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and both women, by the way, represented their parties very well. And Geraldine Ferraro is still active in politics and is commentating on things on the various news channels and these sorts of things. So it's interesting. The other interesting thing about Palin is not just that she's a woman. That in itself is interesting, especially with her background and her particular family circumstances and these sorts of things. But she's from Alaska, which in many ways is even more strange than some of the other factors that might go into it. But it's interesting. I think it was a well thought out choice by McCain to include her on the ticket, and she's certainly, I think, strengthened support for McCain in many ways. So.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for joining us. This is Professor Burkett, and TV2 will be right back after the break.
For the past several months, we have heard a lot about what the candidates stand for, as well as some of their own personal issues. But what do we really know about both senators? Barack Obama was born on August 4th, 1961. He graduated from Columbia University and Harvard Law School. After graduating from law school, Obama worked as a community organizer and practiced as a civil rights attorney. He then served 3 terms in the Illinois Senate from 1997 to 2004. During this time, Obama could also be found teaching constitutional law at the University of Chicago Law School from 1992 until 2004. In November of 2004, Obama was elected into the Senate. This was after an unsuccessful campaign for the House of Representatives in 2000. In February 2007, the young senator announced his plan for the presidential campaign and was formally nominated by his party at the 2008 Democratic National Convention earlier this fall. Obama is the first African-American male from either parties to run from the office of Commander-in-Chief.
John McCain III was born August 29, 1936. The son and grandson of distinguished naval officers, McCain entered the United States Naval Academy in 1954. He graduated in 1958 at the rank of 894 out of 899. Other than his political career, McCain can be most noted for an outstanding military career. McCain continued the family tradition of service to America by serving in Vietnam. McCain had many near-death experiences during his time in Vietnam. In 1967, McCain was shot down and severely injured while on a bombing mission over Hanoi. McCain was captured by North Vietnamese soldiers and remained a prisoner of war until 1973. After retiring from the Navy in 1981, McCain left with colorful career highlights and honors such as a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, a Purple Heart, and a Distinguished Flying Cross. In 1986, McCain was elected the United States Senate as a Republican candidate from Arizona. He was re-elected in 1992, 1998, and in 2004, where his term will expire on January 3, 2011. McCain was also an unsuccessful candidate for the Republican presidential nomination in 2000. McCain resides in Phoenix, Arizona, where his wife, Cindy, their 7 children, and 4 grandchildren also live. And up next on TV2's election night coverage, we'll have the latest updates for you, so make sure you stay tuned.
Once they've voted, they've done their civic duty.
But that's just a start. Voting is important.
But for democracy to work well, people need to stay involved.
We all need to vote, stay informed about public issues, contact elected officials, and get involved in our communities.
Our democracy might have its flaws,
but it demands participation to remain responsive. As Justice Brandeis once said,
the only title in our democracy superior to that of president is the title of citizen.
Nuclear weapons material stored in laboratories and other facilities, some protected by just a chain-link fence. Terrorists are trying to steal these materials to make a nuclear bomb and attack us here. We need to stop them at the source by locking down the materials. There is something you can do to protect America. Visit saferworld.org. Be part of stopping a catastrophe before it happens.
Salam.
Jam.
Salam. Hey, what?
Hey there. Apa apa? Pa.
Mir. Shanti. Yep, Sanyokdi.
We all want the same thing.
Peace.
And Rotary clubs are making it happen. Through international scholarships for young people to promote peace and understanding around the world. Rotary. Humanity in motion.
Across America, service learning is helping students improve their grades and their communities by connecting the classroom with community service. Working together, students solve real problems, build new skills, and apply their knowledge in a whole new way. Inside the classroom and out, service learning opens new doors and brings learning to life. Get your school involved. Visit learnandserve.gov to find out how.
Welcome back to TV2's edition of Election Night coverage. Here's a look at the latest poll results. In the race for the presidential nomination, when Barack Obama is still leading over John McCain with a total of 200 electoral votes, and John McCain is trailing behind with 124.
In the race for Ohio Attorney General, Richard Corriday now trails Mike Kreitz with 52% of the votes.
For the 5th District Representative to Congress, Bob Latta is still leading over George Mays, 58% over 42%.
16th District Rep to Congress, Kirk Schurig is now leading John Bocherry. Schurig has 50% of the votes.
In the 22nd District State Senator race, Bob Gibbs is leading over James Riley with 63% over 36%.
90 House of Representatives, Margaret Ann Rule has 56% of the votes, while Drain Grassbaugh has 44% of the votes.
In the 97th House of Representatives, Dave Hall is leading with 61% over Luke Brewer with 39%.
Ashland County Commissioner Barb Queer leads with 66% of the votes, while Dwayne Stiltsline has 34%.
Ashland County Commissioner Mike Welch is still running unopposed with 100% of the votes.
Prosecuting attorney Ramona Rogers has 100% of the votes, running unopposed.
And congratulations to Ashland County Coroner, who ran unopposed and has 100% of the votes.
State Board of Education for the 5th District, Robin Hovis has 56% of the votes over Richard Jarovec, who has 44%.
Ohio Supreme Court elections, Joseph Reusser is winning 70% over Maureen O'Connor with 30%.
Ohio Supreme Court, Republican Evelyn Stratton has 68% of the votes over Democratic candidate Peter Sikora.
In the Judge 5th Appeals Court, William Hoffman, is winning 66% over Leanne Sefovich with 34%.
For Issue 1, early filing deadlines for statewide ballot issues, voters voted 67% yes and 33% no.
And Issue 2 says yes 66% over no's 34%.
And for Issue 3, protect private property rights to groundwater, voters voted 75% yes to a 25% no.
In Issue 5, voters said yes 65% of the votes and no was 35% of the votes.
And it is going to be no for Issue 6, Amendment State Constitution. Voters voted 71% no to a 29% yes. And for the Ashland City local liquor option, yes was 59% and no was 41% from the voters. Loudonville Village Fire Department, we have 75% of voters voting yes, 23% voted no.
In Loudonville Village Fire Department, 67% of the votes came out yes, with a trailing 32% as no.
Green Perrysville Joint Fire District, yes 56%, no 44%.
And for the Green Township Cemetery, 71% were saying yes and no comes in at 29%.
Hanover Township local liquor option, 60% of voters voted yes, while 40% opposed.
And in Mifflin Township, in the fire and roads, 79% said yes and 21% said no.
Mifflin Township local liquor option, 51% voted yes, while 49% voted no.
Orange Township Fire and EMS has still not had anything posted.
Troy Township Fire Department, 51% yes, 47% of the votes no.
And for Hillsdale Local School District, no came in at 70% and yes is trailing behind with 30%.
For the Mapleton Local School District, we have no 68% with yes for 32%.
And in Ashland County, the voters voted for the Health District. 62 of them said yes and a 39% said no.
And now we are going to talk about battle of voting rights for prisoners in the Mohican area. This resulted from hearing the federal courts. Residents in Ashland County were trying to increase the number of voters by allowing inmates to vote in this year's presidential election. A complaint was filed by the prisoner advocacy group that 16 Mohican Juvenile Correction Facility inmates be restored voter registration privileges. Under the group's terms, the inmates would be given the opportunity to vote using absentee ballots. However, the inmates would only be permitted to vote on issues regarding their county they were originally from, and they would not be able to vote on issues regarding the area the correction center was located in. The hearing took place 8 a.m. on Friday morning in Judge Donald C. Nugent's court.
Early voting has been a key tool used by both parties to get more people involved in this year's election. To date, 32 states, as well as the District of Columbia, have allowed early in-person voting for today's elections. Many officials have estimated that these early ballots will hold as much as 1/3 of the number of votes received. Residents of Virginia and Kentucky were among the first ones in the nation who were eligible to vote early in person as well as by mail. Big cities such as Cleveland, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, and several cities throughout North Carolina saw some of the biggest recorded turnouts this week. Some voters stood in line for hours waiting to cast their ballot, while some buildings had lines wrapped around the block. The number of voters in North Carolina, New Mexico, and Colorado who voted in this election has reached more than 70% of the number of those who voted in the 2004 elections.
More college-age people were expected to participate in this year's historical presidential election. 6.5 million young voters participated in the presidential primary this year, and more were expected to show up for the actual election. 80% of 18 to 24-year-olds plan to vote in this election, compared to 47% that voted in 2004. College students are more worried today about paying for school and finding jobs once they've graduated. Because of this, students showed increased interest in the candidates and issues for the election compared to those in the past. The specific issues bringing young voters to the polls this year are the economy and the war. Another contribution to more young voters participating in this year's election is the fact that schools have been encouraging students to get involved. Students were informed on how to register, how to vote, and how to do the absentee process. Some states, including Ohio, allowed the option of early voting this election, and many students have taken advantage of this. Technology also played a key role in making young voters more knowledgeable and more inspired to participate in this year's election. Internet advertisements have played a key role in informing the age group about candidates and the issues. Plus, Facebook has allowed students to create and support groups for candidates and debate issues among themselves. The candidates realize what a large group of voters students can be, and so they are putting more focus than usual on campaigning to them, Ohio in particular. Student voter population will have an enormous impact because we are considered a swing state. But whether the state or not, one thing is for sure. Increased number of young voters will be a massive impact on the outcome of this year's presidential election.
While the presidential election has been the main focus of this year's elections, there have been many other elections going on across the country that could have a lasting impact to whomever becomes president. These races have been for the seats in the United States Congress and the Senate. The Democrats are trying to increase their lead in the Congress and the Senate after their wins in the 2006 midterm elections, which gave them a majority in both houses of Congress. The main attention has went to the Senate, and where Democrats are trying to gain a 60-seat majority, which will give them a filibuster-proof Senate. This has caused various Senate seats across the country held by Republican senators to become very competitive. The Democrats have targeted states such as Virginia and Minnesota, where the Republican candidates have been seen as the most vulnerable. However, Senator Chuck Schumer, who oversees the Democrats' Senate campaigns, has said a 60-seat majority will be unlikely. On the other hand, the Republicans are seen as safe in states such as South Carolina and Nebraska, which have been reliable Republican seats. A 60-seat majority in the Senate can give a president of the same party the power to appoint judges without the filibuster threat, along with passing legislation.
With various congressional races around the country generating a lot of interest, one of them was the race for the 16th Congressional District in the state of Ohio. The race comes as a result of the retirement of longtime Congressman Ralph Regula, who represented the district since 1972 for a total of 18 consecutive terms. He announced his retirement in October 2007. Regula, who is a Republican, may be replaced by either Democratic candidate John Bocheri or Republican Kurt Scheuring, who both currently serve as state senators in the Ohio State Legislature. John Bocheri's background includes service in the United States Air Force in Iraq and Afghanistan as a pilot of C-130th, and Scheuring has been involved with Ohio politics since 1992. The race for congressional seat comes at a time when the Democrats are looking for a way to increase their lead in Congress and the Senate. Throughout the race, both Scheuring and Bocheri attacked each other on a variety of issues. Schering was attacked on voting for pay raise, while Bocherry was attacked for issues such as being for special interests. The race has been one of the most competitive congressional races despite its Republican history. The Democratic National Campaign Committee has spent a lot of money on TV ads in order for John Bocherry to win. Over the campaign, the race has seen as a dead heat, but as the election day came closer, the race showed the Democratic nominee to be pulling ahead. Up next on TV2, many franchise businesses offered free products to consumers that voted today. Stay tuned to learn out how you can take advantage of this before it's too late.
I am the port in the storm. I am the line in the sand. I am the enforcer of the sea.
We are the defenders of the homeland. We are the shield of freedom. We are the United States Coast Guard.
Heed your country's call. Join the Coast Guard or Coast Guard Reserve.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
And now, another fact of Congress. Voting is the easiest way to participate in our democracy. You just go to the voting booth and check off the best person for the job. Now, some people are voting Scrooges. They think their vote doesn't matter. But if you take a look at history, it tells a different story. In 1845, one vote made Texas part of the United States. In 1920, one vote gave women the right to vote. And in 2000, the presidency of the United States was won by 537 votes out of almost 6 million cast in the state of Florida. That's closer than a buzzer-beater basket, closer than making the school bus. If you don't vote, you have no say in what happens to our country. And that's another fact of Congress.
This one.
Welcome back. We are going to update you on some of our poll results that have been coming in from the Ashland area.
Barack Obama is leading still with 200 electoral votes over John McCain, who has 130.
For Ohio Attorney General, Mike Kreitz is ahead for 52%.
And for 5th District Representative to Congress, Bob Latta is over 59% over George Mays at 40%. 16th District Representative to Congress, Kirk Schurig is still leading over John Bocherry at 51% over 48%.
In the 22nd District State Senator race, Bob Gibbs is ahead 63% to James Riley's 36%.
In the 90 House of Representatives, Margaret Ann Rule is over Dwayne Grassbaugh with 54% over 46%.
Ashland County Commissioner, Republican Barb Queer leads the votes with 63%, as opposed to Dwayne Stiltsland's 37%.
And with the Ashland Commissioner, Michael Welch is still running unopposed with 100% of the votes.
State Board of Education in the 5th District, Robin Hovis is now ahead with 55% of the votes, as opposed to Richard Jerevek's 45%.
And for the Ohio Supreme Court, Joseph Russo is leading 69% over Maureen O'Connor, who's behind with 31%.
Ohio Supreme Court, Evelyn Stratton is ahead with 68% of the votes over Peter Sikora's 32%.
And the Judge 5th Appeals Court, William Hoffman, is still leading over Leanne Sefovich with 68% of the votes.
In Issue 1, early filing deadlines for statewide ballot issues, Voters turned out 66% yes, as opposed to 34% no.
Issue 2, voters are saying 64 of them are saying yes and 36 are saying no.
In issue 3, we have 74% of the votes for yes and 26% of the votes as no.
And in issue 5, it looks like 65% of the voters are saying yes.
Issue 6, we have 71% votes no, as over top of 29% for yes.
And Ashland City Local Liquor Option, 59% of the voters are saying yes.
Loudonville Fire Department has voted 77% yes, as opposed to 23% no.
Loudonville Village Fire Department, in their levy that they're trying to pass, 67% is saying yes and 32% is saying no.
Green Perrysville Joint Fire District, has voted 56% yes and 44% no.
And in Green Township Cemetery, 71% of the voters said yes today, while 29% said no.
Hanover Township Local Liquor Option, yes 60%, no 40%.
And Mifflin Township's Fire and Roads, 79% of the voters said yes today, as well as 21% who said no.
For Troy Township Fire Department, we have in a close race, yes 51%, no 47%.
Hillsdale Local School District, their levy, 70% of voters said no today, while 30% said yes.
And for the Mapleton Local School District, 68% voted no, while only 32% voted yes.
In the Ashland County Health Department, they are going to go ahead and go through with it. And the polls have closed for Election Day 2008, but many voters and campaign supporters will spend the rest of the evening waiting to celebrate the new president who has been named. TV2's own on-scene reporter, Molly Frattanoni, gives a better look at the local elections taking place. Molly?
Thanks, Brittany. The race for the presidency has been geared towards college students this year more than ever before. Many political groups around campus have gathered tonight to watch the results come in. The Young Democrats has been gathered in the Schar Building of Education, and many Ashbrook scholars have been gathered in the Ashbrook Center, located on the 8th floor of AU's library. Students have also been watching live feeds of election coverage from the Eagle's Nest, located in the Hawkins Conrad Student Center. Both presidential hopefuls, McCain and Obama, also plan to celebrate their potential victories throughout the remainder of the night. McCain will be watching the polls tonight from Phoenix, Arizona, while Obama watches from Chicago.
I'm Molly here with Ashland's TV2, and we're at the Republican watch party tonight for the election up in the Ashbrook Center in the library. And I'm here with Katie, and we're going to get her views on the election. How do you see tonight playing out?
I see tonight playing out. It's going to be a sad night because I think Obama's going to win. But I'm still keeping hope and crossing my fingers. Hopefully it'll be a long night.
So you definitely want McCain to win then?
For sure.
Makes sense. We're at the Republican watch party. All right, thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
And we have Dr. Weaver here, English professor. What do you want to see happen tonight?
I want Obama to win, and it's looking pretty good right now that Indiana is tied even without the big Democratic stronghold, so I'm very hopeful. So we'll know in a few minutes.
How do you think Ohio's going to go?
I have no idea. I have no faith in Ohio, unfortunately, but here's hope.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Weaver.
You're welcome.
We also have Dr. Ashbrook scholar. Maggie, how do you want tonight to go?
I'm really hoping Obama wins too, and I think he's going to get it. So I'm excited.
Do you think it's going to be close?
No.
Blowout?
Yes.
Fabulous. Thanks. Next we have Lauren Arnold with her beautiful Hope shirt on. Lauren, how would you like to see tonight work?
I definitely want to see Obama pull it out, but I think right now it's a little too close for comfort.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from the Republicans too, but about Obama still. Interesting.
But we've been working really hard in Ashland County. Ashland County is a bit of a bellwether for the state of Ohio right now, so we're excited.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thanks for joining us here on our Watch of the Watch Parties. If you would like to join one, we have the Republican Watch Party up in the Ashbrook Center in the library. And here in Schar's Auditorium, we have the Democratic Watch Party. Both will be going on pretty late into the night until the race has a clear winner. Thanks for joining us.
In an effort to encourage more people to get out and vote this year, many businesses that can be found nationwide offered free products to customers to reward them from voting in this year's election. Starbucks offered a free small-sized coffee if you told them you had voted, and Ben & Jerry's offered a free scoop of ice cream between 5 to 8 p.m. For other businesses, all you had to do is show them your I voted sticker, and you could get free goodies. Chick-fil-A also handed out chicken sandwiches regularly priced at $2.70 to all adults for free that showed proof of voting. 85 Krispy Kreme stores nationwide also participated by giving away free star-shaped donuts with red, white, and blue patriotic sprinkles.
With the election coming to a close this evening, so draws an end to most political satire and comedy skits that have been entertaining us for the past couple months. With this election being historical, there has been an overload of different political spoofs leading up to tonight. Of course, on Comedy Central, both campaigns have had their share of being poked fun at on a nightly basis with Jon Stewart's The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert's The Colbert Report. The pair are even hosting an election night special, Indecision 2008, which is scheduled to air this evening. However, they are not the only ones getting in on the action. Anything from The New Yorker to Saturday Night Live, even Paris Hilton. Yes, Paris Hilton has gotten her share of political mockery in during the campaign. Now, obviously, Saturday Night Live skits are probably the most famous spoofs in the election. But let's not forget, this is not SNL's first time putting their spin on the political campaign. In the show's 35-year history, they have had many memorable presidential parodies, such as Jimmy Carter, played by Dan Aykroyd, George H.W. Bush, portrayed by Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman's portrayal of Bill Clinton, and the uncanny 2000 election skits featuring Will Ferrell and Darrell Hammond as George W. Bush and Al Gore. Now, Fred Armisen plays the role of Barack Obama, Darrell Hammond is back as John McCain, and who could forget Tina Fey's almost identical Sarah Palin impressions. Not only did these candidates get spoofed on SNL, but they have made cameo appearances on the show. In September, Senator Barack Obama had to cancel his appearance due to tragedies with Hurricane Ike. However, the October 18th episode featured the real Sarah Palin, and this past week, Senator John McCain made his own appearance. Now, with this said, I wanted to know, if you appear on such a show as Saturday Night Live that has been poking fun at the candidates for the past few months, does this help or hurt their campaign efforts? I asked some of Ashland University's student viewers what they thought, and here's what the end result is. I think it is a good thing because it brings the politicians to a more human level, so that would help. However, at the same time, it takes away from their credibility. This was said by sophomore Carrie Charlton. Another sophomore, Molly Fradiani, said, "It worked for Bill Clinton on Jay Leno." Senior Mandy Levering says, "I don't think that it would get more people to vote for them, but it shows a different side of their personality." And finally, Junior Alan Williams said, "It helps get their name out there, but do they really need it? It does one of two things. It can make them look somewhat dumb and give them the public fuel to mock them, but it also can make them look like they can take a joke and they can make lighthearted of a situation." Well, that's all very good insight, and it looks as though there are many common threads in the statements that the students made. The past few months have also had so many memorable moments in political comedy. Coming up next on TV2, we'll give you an inside look at what we can expect to happen the next president takes office. Stay tuned.
Have you saved a life today?
I took 2 flood victims to a shelter.
I donated a day's pay to help a family that lost everything in a fire.
Have you saved a life today?
I teach a class in infant CPR.
I donated a pint of blood.
Have you saved a life today?
No. But today somebody saved mine.
The American Red Cross. Together, we can save a life.
There are a lot of big issues in a national agenda.
But sometimes we help our communities most by getting involved in local issues.
Getting a traffic light at a dangerous intersection or cleaning up a polluted stream can improve lives and strengthen communities. That's what American democracy is all about.
I've always liked the attitude of the carpenter who said, "I cannot solve the world's problems, but I can help build this house."
Together, we can build a better future.
Get involved.
And now, another fact of Congress. Sometimes criticizing Congress seems like a national sport, but that's not always accurate. Most legislators want to serve the public. We may hear about a bad apple or two, but on the whole, most legislators are good-hearted people. Overall, most of your money is spent on important, widely supported projects like protecting our country and assisting senior citizens. While some lawmakers fund projects that only support their district, whether or not it's wasteful is often in the eye of the beholder. Just like styles change, sometimes a congressperson's opinion changes over time, just like ours might. New information can give you new ideas. And that's another fact of Congress.
The day that will go down in history has almost reached its end. People across the country are now waiting for the word on who will be the next new commander-in-chief. TV2 reporter Molly Fradiani sat down with director of the Ashbrook Center, Dr. Peter Schramm, to find out what U.S. citizens could expect if McCain wins and what they can expect if Obama wins.
I'm Molly with Ashland's TV2. Today we have the Executive Director of the Ashbrook Center, Dr. Peter Schramm, with us today, and we're going to be asking him a couple of questions about the election here tonight. So, Dr. Schramm, do you think that, well, how do you think the world is going to look if McCain is president?
Well, that's a 50-minute question. I don't have that kind of time. The world will look essentially the same as it looks now if McCain is elected president. The reason he won't be elected president is because he hasn't been able to articulate how the world would look different.
Yeah. So do you think there's going to be significant changes then if Obama becomes president?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it looks like Obama's going to become president, and there will be massive changes just because it'll be a Democrat taking over after 8 years, a Republican president. 2 years after great Democratic victories in the Senate and the House, which victories in the House and the Senate will be expanded upon as best as we can tell. And of course, Mr. Obama has different plans for the country that are more expansive in terms of government programs, for example, different kinds of diplomatic initiatives internationally. And let's not forget that he's going to become president, even if it's McCain. Either one will become president in the beginning stages of a serious economic crisis that began, 3 or 4 weeks ago in the middle of the election. That's one of the reasons Obama's going to be elected, I think.
So if Obama does become elected, do you think the economy will positively respond to that?
I think there's always at first a positive response to a new person in the White House and a new party in the White House, especially under these conditions. That will change over the next 3 to 6 months, or I should say 3 to 6 months after he becomes president. There'll be a kind of a gap there of a few months between the election and January 20th. Everything leads us to think that Obama, if he's elected, will have a difficult first year, much more difficult than he would have hoped.
Why do you think he'll run into these difficulties?
Well, mostly not of his own doing at the moment. In other words, the credit crisis and the recession that we seem to be in will probably continue, at least the latter. The recession will continue for 6 months, maybe even a year, according to some estimates, which means that will not only have an effect domestically and his domestic policies, whatever they might end up to be, but also in the international community. I mean, countries like Russia, for example, have, they are effectively in a depression, in my opinion, partly because of the credit crisis and what that brought, and partly because of the low value placed on a barrel of oil, which is how Russia makes its money. Western Europe is in a much more difficult situation, I think, than the United States is with regard to the banking crisis. Iceland basically is bankrupt. Austria is not far behind. Switzerland is not doing so hot. Spain, for example. So,
well, how do you think Ohio is going to elect tonight?
well, Ohio, you know, I think most analysts think that Obama's up by a couple of points in Ohio, and I think that's probably right. I think his ground game, as the analysts say, is much better than the Republicans' ground game, and they're going to get out the vote. They'll probably get more than 20 to 30% more Democrats to vote for them than they did in 2004, which means if their plan works the way they plan, that they ought to win the state by about 200,000 votes, which would be about 4 points.
Awesome.
I expect, awesome only if you're a Democrat, I expect the Democrats to take Ohio in Pennsylvania. So it seems to me that McCain really has to pull what they call something equivalent to an inside straight in order to win. That's why I don't think he will win.
So do you think there's going to be a clear winner pretty soon tonight?
I think, unfortunately, the media will announce a clear winner sooner than they should, because polls will still be open by, say, 8 o'clock our time when the polls close. On the East Coast, there will many states, including, I think, Virginia and Indiana, close at 7. Their polls close at 7. So based on exit polls, we will have a pretty good idea of how Virginia and Indiana goes. And if Obama takes both of those, it's unimaginable to me how McCain can get elected. If he only takes Virginia, which is more probable, I don't think he'll take Indiana, then there'll still seem to be an open contest. And then other polls will close at 7:30. North Carolina, I think, closes at 7:30, and Florida, and then Ohio at 8, and so forth. So by 8 o'clock our time, we ought to have a pretty good idea. Although I must say, there's a problem with this, because about 30% of voters have already voted before today's voting day. And so I don't know how you can factor those votes into what people call exit poll results. You see what I'm saying? So NBC and the networks will announce a winner based on exit polls, but those exit polls will be much more imperfect than they have been in the past, because so many people will have voted before, and we don't know how they voted, is the truth of the matter. And we have no way of telling, because you can't pull people back and have them fill out the exit poll forms. You see what I mean?
So who do you think ran the better campaign then? Was it Obama?
Oh, I think in this, there's no question that Obama ran a virtually flawless campaign. I can't even think of an exception where he made, or his campaign made, any large mistakes. And contrary, I must say, the Republicans and McCain for president ran a very bad campaign. It was just, it seemed like they never got their timing right, and they never got a theme to their pudding. And so they just kept going from issue to issue, what they think would work for them that day or that week. And they might have gotten some traction, you know, a couple of days before the financial crash, but 3 or 4 days after, they lost their footing altogether.
Yeah.
And it's been, and they've never regained it, in my opinion.
All right, well, we're going to toss it back to the desk then. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
Many polls across the country have been closed for as much as 4 hours. However, the night is far from over for officials tallying the votes. Here's a look at your last updates from TV2. In the race for the president, Barack Obama has continued to gain more electoral votes, with a total of 207 over McCain, who has increased his votes as well to 135.
In the race for Attorney General, Mike Kreitz leads 52% to Richard Corday's 42%.
And for the 5th District Representative to Congress, Bob Latta is still leading 59% over George Mays at 40%.
16th District Representative to Congress, Kirk Schuring Republican leads 51% to John Bocherry's 48%.
In the 22nd District for State Representative, Senator, Bob Gibbs is leading 63% over James Riley at 36%.
90th House of Representatives, Margaret Ann Rule leads 54% to Dwayne Grassbaw's 46%.
And in the 97th House of Representatives, Dave Hall is winning 61% over Luke Brewer at 39%.
Ashland County Commissioner, Barb Queer leads 63% of the votes to Dwayne Stiltslean's 37%.
For the State Board of Education in the 5th District, Robin Hovis is winning 55% over Richard Javorek at 45%.
Ohio Supreme Court finds Joseph Russo leading 69% of the votes to Maureen O'Connor's 31%.
And in the Ohio Supreme Court, Evelyn Stratton is winning 68% over Peter Sikora at 32%.
Judge 5th Appeals Court, William Hoffman has 68% of the votes, and Leanne Stefasic has 32%.
In Issue 1 in the state, there was 66% of the voters that voted yes tonight, and 34% of them said no.
Voters turning out on Issue 2 voted 64% yes and 36% no.
And in Issue 3, which is private property rights to groundwater, 74% of them said yes and 26% said no.
Issue 5 finds 65% voters voting yes and 35% voting no.
In Issue 6, 71% said no, with only 29% stating yes.
Ashland City Local Liquor Option, 59% of the voters voted yes for this and 41% of the voters said no.
And in Loudonville Village Fire Department, 77 said yes and 23 voted no.
Loudonville Village Fire Department, 67% of voters voted yes and 32% of voters said no.
And in Green Perrysville Joint Fire District, 56 voted yes, 44 voted no.
Green Township Cemetery, 71% of voters said yes and 29% of voters said no.
And in Hanover Township Local Liquor Option, 60 voted yes, 40 voted no.
Mifflin Township Fire and Roads, 79% of voters approved this and only 21% opposed this decision.
Mifflin Township Local Liquor Option, 56 of the residents said yes and 43 said no.
Troy Township Fire Department, 57% of voters said yes and 43% of voters opposed.
Hillsdale Local School District, 66 said no, 34 said yes.
And the Mapleton Local School District, 69% of voters said no, 31% said yes.
And that about does it for TV2's election night coverage.
We should just like to thank our TV2 crew. If you're interested in helping out with Ashland's television station, you're more than welcome. You can email us at tv2@ashland.edu.
And don't forget to join us this Thursday at 4:30 for TV2's weekly newscast.
Thank you everyone for joining us on this election night coverage.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.